Do you remember stomp clap movies? I'm talking Secret Life of Walter Mitty, Perks of Being a Wallflower, or this 2010 gem set in a psych ward. It's day 109 of 365. Today's movie, it's kind of a funny story. Discover more about the Daily Stub Review Project over on my Patreon. Over there, you'll get access to these reviews early, as well as vodcasts and my book. You can find that link in my profile. Directed by Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, who direct nothing but bangers, and starring Keir Gilchrist, Zach Galifianakis, and Emma Roberts. This was one of those heartfelt, heart-touching movies that I saw back in 2010. This one kind of caught me by the throat. I was there because I liked Galifianakis in The Hangover, so I thought it was going to be very funny. And I wasn't aware of all of my own personal traumas, so the way that this was just gonna kind of hit me in the face was kind of crazy. It also probably didn't hurt that Zoe Kravitz and Emma Roberts were here. I had crushes on both of them walking out of the theater that last until this day. Rewatching in this day, I was shocked at how personal this movie ended up feeling to me. Having processed a lot of the traumas from my teen years, I was just kind of blown away by how personal this ended up feeling to me. A lot of the topics in this movie were things that I knew were going on but didn't have words for, and now that I had the words and the processes, it just made it that much more personal. It grabbed me by the throat a second time. This movie goes out of its way to avoid psych ward cliches. Think movies like K-Pax, those Oscar bait, all about the drama and performance, and instead keeps things very dialed in and low-key. Craig isn't an angel here to save everyone on this floor. Instead, he's going to be deeply impacted by seeing how good he actually has it. That's not to say that his problems aren't real. They're very real, but he has a new appreciation in being able to take them on after witnessing people that have suffered in ways that he just hasn't. This is a movie about facing your privilege before privilege was part of the big, broader conversation. Now that I'm no longer a teen, I've lived long enough that many of the characters in this movie have become archetypes, people that I've known in my life. I've known Bobbies and Noels, and that just made this movie all that much more touching for me. So let's talk about the three things that I really liked about It's Kind of a Funny Story. The first thing that I really like about this movie is an understated Zach Galifianakis. Now, he's not funny in this movie, let's be clear. He's a comedian, but he's a comedian with depth. If you only knew him from The Hangover, you actually have only scratched the surface of what this man's comedic genius is like. If you've seen his stand-up or any of his deeper films and TV shows, you know that this guy is more character than comedy, and this is kind of our first dip into that, I think, as broader audiences. I had forgotten how charming he was in this movie. His ability to kind of lead a scene around and still be deeply vulnerable whenever his own trauma was brought up was just absolutely excellent. Like I said, I've known Bobbies in my life. I've been best friends with people like this who are always charming but always wearing a mask. And it's not that they can't be fully real, it's that facing the things that are inside of them is too much. They fear that they won't be supported if they do. His character's almost more of a main character in this movie than Craig ends up being, if I'm being honest. I think that a movie centered around him wouldn't have had the young teenage stomp clap push that we're looking for here, but it still would have really worked. Pushing him into a side character allows more space for the plot to unfold, but the story here is almost really his story. He and Craig are dealing with the same thing. It's an inability to turn that mirror fully inward and face down the things that they're so scared of. There's a really poignant therapy scene with Viola Davis, who is also, by the way, underutilized in this movie, where she asks a poignant question about what would happen if Craig didn't do the things that have been laid out for him, and he's not willing to answer that question. It's not that he can't, it's that he's totally unwilling to face that question down. Zach Galifianakis' character is doing the same thing. He's unwilling to ask what would happen if he did face down the traumas in his life. He's more afraid of the success because the failure is more comfortable. That is just so applicable for today. They're still talking about that in 2010 in a very soft way, in a way that's not trying to vilify or angelicize anything, but make it real. And I was really impressed by that. The second thing that I really, really like about this movie is that it represents a new kind of escapism for teens. I found that myself. This is a very personal experience for me. And so finding a movie that was not super bad, but still dealing with things from a teen point of view was so much fun. Now, I hadn't seen Perks of Being a Wallflower at this point. I wouldn't see that until later on, but I don't think I would have liked that one more than I ended up liking It's Kind of a Funny Story, because Perks is more interested in a more insular teen experience. This movie is willing to compare a teen's problems to adults' problems, and the book as well, in that way, is verifying and validating that these are deeply human issues. We have this point of view, especially as Americans, that kids' trauma and teen trauma is not as weighty as adult trauma. But that's just patently not true. That's not even how psychology works. And so for a movie to say, no, this teen's trauma is just as important as all the adults around him, his problems are equally as important to him, but he still hasn't had this point of view of how fucked up things could be, how much worse things could be in a way that he could actively fix his problems. The movie's willingness to talk about this in that way and give them that kind of light was really validating for me as a teen. I was actually a couple of years older than this character when I went to see the movie, but we were both teenagers, we were both young men, and so this just spoke so deeply to me. The fact that his best friend and his rival was this hair-swooped, emo, everyone loves him kind of guy also spoke very deeply to me. Many of my antagonists as teens were guys that looked like this, that were also insecure, that were also, dealing with that depression thing. But because it wasn't being talked about well in their families, they didn't know that it was a real problem either. I kind of feel lucky in my adult life that I faced this stuff down as early as I did, because many of the guys that I knew haven't even begun to face this down. They're still living as teenagers now in their 30s. And that's sad to watch. And that's exactly what this movie's warning you about. If you were to turn into someone like Zach Galifianakis' character, that you could be a full-grown adult still dealing with stuff that had affected you as a kid and as a teen. That's how real these problems are. Kids' emotions are just as big as ours. They just don't have all the words and experiences to apply them to. And I find that really, really cool for a movie to be willing to talk about, especially in 2010. The third and final thing that I really dig about this movie is its use of masculinity as softness. Pairing Gilchrist with Galifianakis and allowing a kind of bro masculinity relationship to grow, where they're not talking past each other, they're talking to each other. This is an important distinction to make. Many men grow up working alongside other men, and it's that work that becomes their closeness. There's no actual direct back and forth happening. It's just there's similarities that make them friends. This is a very specific kind of relationship about asking questions. Galifianakis even brings this up at a certain point and says people like to be asked questions. This changes how Gilchrist approaches life in the ward after that. He starts asking people things, and that's a big change. When you switch from confidence about how things work into curiosity, you allow yourself to grow, and growth is the name of the game when you live in a psych ward, even for just a couple of days. The point is for you to grow into the kind of person that can begin to face down your problems. Maybe you end up back there, maybe you regress. That's okay, because that growth that you got earlier will be tacked onto with any new growth that you get. When you add masculinity into the mix, what you get is something that could go toxic very quick. This could have been a oh, come on, bro, buck up. My life's way worse than yours. They don't even make that comparison directly. Galifianakis says towards the end that he didn't want to say that to him, but it's true. He would have traded his life for Craig's at any point just to have easy problems again, now that he's adult enough and brave enough to face them down. The real bravery comes with facing them down at whatever age you're at. This is kind of like an alt-left pipeline. A thing that's saying, no, masculinity isn't bucking up and being courage and buckling down and moving through it without it affecting you. It's going to affect you, and that affectation is okay. It's changing you in ways that you can grow from and be bigger than it, instead of it bouncing off of you because you're invincible. A toxic masculinity is going to beg you to ignore the problems around you, much like Galifianakis' character has. A non-toxic masculinity is going to beg you to face these things down, even if it's your dad pushing the problem. Jim Gaffigan showing up as the straight-laced dad in this movie is another weird switch on the character, because we're not used to seeing him like this. If you see his stand-up, he's a soft guy. What he preaches is a male softness. And as a dad in this movie, he's the thing for Gilchrist to overcome. Craig can't get around these issues until he faces down potentially letting his dad down, which is okay because that's how he's going to grow into the person that can show up in a way to make his dad proud. But what do you think? Did you totally ignore this movie when it came out? I know this was not widely seen or received because it was based on a not super popular book, but I went to see it because of the actors involved. I'm curious what your thoughts are. We've already talked about Tony Scott's subway train movie with Denzel Washington. Now we're going to talk about his freight train movie with Denzel Washington. We're talking Unstoppable next, and as always, I'll see you tomorrow.